Okay, so before we get started talking about this pitching staff and getting excited about opening day, which is tomorrow if you're watching this on Wednesday, I'm going to be speaking of opening day at Jimmy's on First for about 3 hours from like 12 to 3, something along those lines. Going to be recording a Molly Watt Monday with Ian Furness and Nathan Bishop for KJR. Going to do that, and then I'll hang out for a little bit. We'll record at noon, and then I imagine just for a couple hours, I'll shoot the breeze, or another word that I'm not allowed to say, for a little bit. I'd love to see him. Love to be able to shake a hand, or, I'm a hugger. You can give me a hug if you want. Just a lot of fun. If you're not familiar with Jimmy's on First, it's right across the street from Safeco Field. It's a really nice little restaurant / bar. I would recommend it. But if you're going to be at the park a little early, or if you're just in the Seattle area, Jimmy's on First. I'll be there from about 12 to 3. Super exciting opening day. I love opening day. It's one of my favorite days of the year. I think it's tough to beat. Part of the reason I think it's tough to beat is I've never experienced a World Series. So I bet you that's better. But opening day is awfully good. Opening day is awfully good. And on top of just being excited because of a new season and stuff like that, I think one of the reasons that we can be excited as Seattle Mariner fans, this pitching staff's really talented. Very, 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 very talented. It has a chance to be the best pitching staff in baseball. Not necessarily predicting that for some reasons we'll go over as we get there. But on paper, and on paper, just the results it had last year, and considering that most of these guys are going to get better rather than worse, there's every reason to think this will be one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. And I think they just might have the best rotation in baseball. Let's look at the projected rotation to open the year. Opening the year, I think, is a key point here. Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, and Emerson Hancock. So in terms of a big three, I'm taking it over anyone. All due respect to some really good pitching staffs. And if Texas had Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom healthy, maybe this is a little bit different conversation, but they're not. Seattle's rotation, aside of one guy who we'll get to, is healthy. And it was phenomenal. It is the main reason why the Seattle Mariners stayed in contention for as long as they did. And by as long as I did, or as long as they did, that is the end of the season. Just one game played where they were eliminated. And a lot of it, the credit goes to this rotation. Luis Castillo, unfortunately, leaves a little bit of a bitter taste in your mouth because the last two starts didn't go very well. It's worth pointing out he didn't get a whole heck of a lot of run support, but, you expect more from your ace. And Luis Castillo is still the ace of this staff, and I think he is a top 6 to 7 starting pitcher in baseball. I think even if you look at those two starts and they were, not clutch, the overall body of work was phenomenal. He was a Cy Young candidate for the overwhelming majority of the year. Not a lot wrong with that pitching at the top of your rotation. Followed by George Kirby. And I think some people are expecting George Kirby to make another massive step forward. And I'm not completely ruling it out. I kind of think what you see is what you get. But what you see is really freaking good. That command is as good as any pitcher, regardless of age. He's not just a guy who's throwing strikes for the sake of throwing strikes. He is a legitimate top of the rotation starter. He would be the ace on a lot of staffs, a lot of them. And it won't shock me if he's the ace of this staff, and that's not an insult to Castillo. It's absolutely a compliment to Kirby. Kirby's stuff is good enough, and command especially, is good enough for him to be at the top of any rotation. And, oh, by the way, Logan Gilbert, who would be the number 1 or number 2 starter on the overwhelming majority of teams. Like, he's probably a top 15 starter in baseball right now, and that's your 3rd starter. We give the Mariners a lot of caca here, and we should. There's no question about it. But they deserve some praise for their pitching development because George Kirby and Logan Gilbert weren't surefire things. You know, they were first-round picks. They were guys that people liked an awful lot, but they weren't considered super high ceiling guys. They were considered high floor guys. The Mariners have developed those guys into high ceiling guys. If Gilbert can just show a little bit more consistency, this has a chance to be a legitimate big three. I'm not talking Smoltz, Glavine, Maddox. How did I almost forget Greg Maddox's name? I'm not talking about anything like that. But it has a chance to be like a legitimate big three. Bryce Miller pitching behind those guys, a ton of talent. I think we saw unbelievable flashes of brilliance from him. Can he get left-handers out? If he can get left-handers out, this being your fourth starter makes this a special pitching staff. Because the stuff's there. The spin is just unbelievable. Right-handers have absolute fits against this guy. You know, if for some reason he can just never develop a pitch good enough to get lefties out, this guy in the bullpen, that could be scary. And I can't help but think and look forward, if the Mariners make the postseason and you can line it up to have Castillo, Kirby, and Gilbert make your three starts, and you've got Bryce Miller coming out of the bullpen, I like it. I like it an awful lot. But let's just keep in mind that he and the next guy we're going to talk about here, they kind of feasted on crap. They took advantage of the fact that Oakland was one of the worst teams I've ever seen. And you take a look at those numbers for Miller against righties, dominant. Against lefties, yuck. Can he make that next step forward? And my one concern is the Mariners are relying on him not to be an ace, obviously, or even a mid-rotation guy, but your fourth starter, you were expecting to make 20 or so quality starts. And by quality starts, I'm not talking 6 innings of 3 runs or baseball. That stat is stupid. I'm talking about effective starts. Can he do that? I'm not 100% convinced just yet. I think we will see a lot of good, and we'll see some, shaky. We'll see some shaky. So that's what's nice about having a big three like that. Because if you're getting 2 out of 3 wins with those guys every time, every time being a hyperbolic thing, but you know what I mean. So Brian Wu is your projected 5th starter for the overwhelming majority of the year. Unfortunately, because of elbow inflammation, he's going to miss some time. We talked about it in the last video. We really don't know how long that'll be. They're being very optimistic. They're optimistic about a lot of things with pitching injuries. I'll repeat it again. Never believe ownership, general manager, anyone when they tell you what a prognosis is for a starting pitcher until you see them make a rehab start. Or if they, it'd be great if he didn't need a rehab start. This is the biggest concern for me with the starting rotation, obviously. And the nice thing is it's your 5th starter. And I thought Brian Wu, talk about feasting on Oakland and feasting on the bottom dwellers and not having great success against the others. But there's no denying that his stuff and command are good enough to be a mid-rotation starter, or maybe even better, for a really long time. Emerson Hancock is going to take his place in the rotation for now. I will be extremely curious to see, 1, how he pitches, and 2, how aggressive they are if he struggles. Because let's assume that Wu won't be back until middle of May. I think that's right about right. I think that's, a fairly conservative but realistic timeline. How many starts can you have Emerson Hancock make? Let's not forget that the Mariners missed the postseason last year. I don't think we can forget it, but by 1 game, and Chris Flexen made a few starts that really hurt this baseball team. So how much of a leash does Emerson Hancock have? I'm going to be really curious. I think he has the stuff to be a solid, if unspectacular, back-end starter. I still think Hancock's stuff plays better in the bullpen. But I'll be really curious to see. Hey, guys, let's not fight. I got a couple of dogs that are, just having a good time. They also agree that Emerson Hancock plays better in the bullpen, apparently. But on paper, this rotation, if it's not the best in baseball, it's top 3. That's as low as I can go. And I really struggle with thinking like what staff is clearly better or even on par. It's that good. I wish I could say the same thing about the lineup, but, pitching's going to be okay. Well, I think the pitching's going to be okay because the bullpen's a little scary, at least to begin the year. So Andre Munoz, set it and forget it closer. He's frustrated me last year and still put up fantastic numbers. And it's worth pointing out that he dealt with a couple of injuries. He dealt with a not normal offseason. And the fact that this guy is still only 25 years old. He seems like a veteran who has been around forever. No. Last year, I believe, was the second time that he's been in a bullpen for the full season. That's lofty expectations we had, and I think he mostly hit them. I want to see him be more aggressive with his fastball, and hopefully he gets the slider command back because that is an extremely effective pitch. Mariners are awfully good at developing those pitches. But there's a lot of pressure on Munoz to begin the year because of the fact that Matt Brash and Gregory Santos are not going to be on this team to begin the year. So Munoz, I'm going to be curious to see how, because I think they would like to be able to use him in the 8th inning, 7th inning situations where the 3, 4, 5 is coming up. But you can't do that when you don't really have a arm that you trust at the back end to come in after Munoz. Now, Ryan Stanek is signed, and, I'm still surprised by the contract he got just because the Mariners using those kind of resources, the Mariners are fine. It just surprised me. Ryan Stanek is fine. I think he's a solid mid-inning arm. I don't love him as my best high leverage guy behind what is assuming to be my closer. And I don't love the depth behind those guys either. Taylor Saucedo, Gabe Spire, Trent Thornton, Austin Voth. It's not horrific, but it's not great. They're missing Justin Topa, who unfortunately is dealing with an injury in Minnesota. And who knows if he'd be dealing with an injury in Seattle. But, it's not the same bullpen as last year. Now, here's the good news. Hopefully, we get Matt Brash and Gregory Santos back early in the year. And by we, I mean the Seattle Mariners. You know what I'm saying. Because Matt Brash is one of the most talented pitchers in baseball, regardless of bullpen, starting, whatever. Matt Brash is special. And Gregory Santos, while I have some concerns that his fastball got lit up last year, the stuff is electric. Those 3, when healthy, give the Mariners an elite 7th, 8th, 9th type of situation. Elite. But because Brash is dealing with injury as well as Santos, you're going to be missing those guys. And you're going to have some guys who just aren't quite at their level pitching in high leverage situations. It's concerning. It's concerning in part because, you can say, look, it's early. I don't want to hear that. The Mariners have to get off to a good start. The Mariners have not gotten off to good starts the last 2 years, and it nearly cost them a playoff spot in 2022, and it did cost them a playoff spot in 2023. They have to get off to a good start. And, those names that I mentioned above, they can do the job. Like Gabe Spire, I think, is an effective reliever. Taylor Saucedo looked really good in spring to me. Had a couple clunkers, which just happened, but the stuff looked good. Ryan Stanek has had a lot of success in 2022. By result, he was one of the best relievers in baseball. I'm a little worried about the bullpen. I'm certainly more worried about the bullpen than I am the starting rotation. And that, probably goes without saying, but it's worth bringing up anyway. On the 40-man, just some guys who could come up and help at some point. Not a lot. Edward Bizzardo, maybe. Cody Bolton. Just looking through this. Colin Snyder. Carlos Vargas. Interesting. He has no idea where anything's going, but that stuff is electric. If they can figure out how he can throw more consistent strikes, maybe he can be a helper. Mariners have done a really good job with that profile over the last few years. Ty Adcock, who I think is just really struggling with the modern rigors right now, but I thought looked good in his limited sample. Certainly could be a guy who could help in the middle innings. But that's pretty much it. And unfortunately, like, Casey Lawrence is probably your 7th starter right now. That's not great. There's not a lot of depth in this pitching staff right now. It will be better as these guys get healthy. Obvious point is obvious. And, they need to get healthy in order for that fact to even kind of matter. But depth is going to be tested. Depth is going to be tested. And I will be extremely curious to see how aggressive they are if some of these guys struggle. Because they certainly have the payroll room to add whatever they want. And they've got some pretty good prospects to go add some guys to. So this pitching staff could be among the best in baseball. There just is, and not just among the best, it could be the best. There's a little more volatility here than I would love. Just a few more risks combined with rewards in order for me to call it that great staff. But on paper and based on results last year, this is a very special pitching staff. Potentially. And at the very worst, I think it'll be well above average. That's pretty high praise. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. Tomorrow I will do a preview video, just kind of looking at predicting where they're going to finish in the American League. Do I think they'll make the postseason? All that stuff. So yeah, please hit like and subscribe. Again, if you're thinking about coming out to Jimmy's on First, please do so because I would love to see you. You guys are the best. Tomorrow, opening day. Can't wait.